Hi everyone. Today I welcome Charu Purohit among us. She is a long-time friend of me, of Asanify, and our entire team. She has been with supporting us from the outside from the beginning. She's a extremely talented HR. I know her for I think more than 10 years now, and currently she is in a very senior position in the HR team at Nykaa. I would leave the rest to Charu to introduce herself. But welcome, Charu. How are you feeling today? And do tell us.
Extremely humbled and privileged to be here with you, Priyom. I mean, both as friends and colleagues, you have a lot of my respect. So it's an absolute privilege to be here with you. Also, the introduction you gave, I mean, yeah, I couldn't have done it better. But so I've been around the block for about 15 years now, leading various pieces in HR, especially focused on rewards, productivity, organization effectiveness, and talent. Currently, I am with Nykaa, heading their rewards COE, apart from looking at performance and organization effectiveness. Prior to that, of course, I've been with organizations like Aditya, which was Cadbury's in India at the time, and I have been working with various geographies, primarily in India, Middle East, South Asia, and parts of US. So it's been an extremely enriching journey for me working with various sectors, right from established manufacturing industries to new age service industries to now e-commerce and tech related startups. So it's been very interesting how dynamic things have been, and I've been extremely fortunate to be part of this industry. I
Wonderful.
did a master's in HR, so MBA from MDI, Gurgaon, and engineering prior to that. I recently also did international MBA from AGC, so which was an interesting time to rekindle the learning, given how fast environment has been changing.
Understood. Wonderful. And all through this journey, what have been some of the interesting experience? Why HR? Why did you think about your an MBA as you mentioned? Why did you choose the field of HR? What attracted you?
I don't know. It's just somehow worked like that. That in terms of like working with HR, I know people would say that I love people, but that's not my reason at all.
So
It
you are
just
saying you don't
happened.
love people?
I do, but almost as much as anybody in finance or tech, to be
Sure,
honest.
sure.
And being and my bachelor's is in engineering, so I do love numbers more.
Right.
So
Uh,
that's the truth of it. The fact is that when I was graduating, I realized that HR is an area which is upcoming. There's a lot of
mhm,
scope to do things, and I thought it would
mhm,
be an interesting challenge to take up. So it was a risk I
mhm,
took. And most people think when they start their career or when they are in college, etc., they think that HR is just about administration or recruitment.
mhm.
Thankfully that perception is changing now. Hopefully people
Sure.
like me and my friends and colleagues have contributed to that change. But the fact is that I thought there's a lot more to do and there's not much
Mhm.
happening there, so that's how I took it up.
Fantastic. So, what is a typical day in your life? I know every day is different, but if you have to average it out, as a very senior leader in one of the fastest growing and largest startups in the country, how do you typically spend any given average day?
I think it's not limited to my role now. It's been a practice that's
Hmm.
been there for a while since I paused, at least for 5 7 years. What happens as you continue growing? There's a lot of noise that you deal with, so it's important to cancel out that noise and focus on productivity, and
Hmm.
also focus on your team and ensure that you're tuned into what is happening in the team. The other bit
Hmm.
also one has to learn constantly is just make sure that you're tuned into pulse of the organization as HR. I mean, that part doesn't go away
Sure,
irrespective of what
sure.
organization and what stage of your
Hmm.
career you're in. So typically I like to start the day. For me, start and end of the day is very critical. So I'm a morning
Hmm.
person. So if I have a good first half in the day, I mean, I'm set. I feel very happy, and the excitement
So,
of
when do you
the
typically wake up? And what do you do when you do wake up?
So I think more than waking up, what you do with what do you do with your time when you're
Sure.
waking up is more important. So usually, like when I wake up, I try to get few minutes to myself, calm myself down, see what all I need to do, as a mother of a young child,
Mm-hmm.
as an individual who has needs for self care, and as a professional, and as a manager. So I kind of
Mm-hmm.
chalk that out at the end of the day. So that's my night ritual before I start the day. In the morning, then I have this my list ready. So I go tuck 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 so that I get everything out of the park before 9, and then that's
Mm-hmm.
my quiet time. So I do one morning huddle with my team, and that's my quiet time. So then I follow like very age old, very traditional way of attacking my day, the big stones first. So I make sure, irrespective of things being important, urgent, everything, whatever I think is critical for me to deliver in the year, I make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I'm working at it every day. So I make sure,
Okay.
I tell myself at the start of the year that these three things, if I'm able to do in the
Mm-hmm.
organization, then anything else and everything else I will make up for it. I mean, you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
deliver. No matter what people tell you, you're not going to deliver 10 priorities. That's not possible. So, what are those
Right.
five, two, three things that I need to get done? And for
Mm-hmm.
them, I make time every day. That
Mm-hmm.
I make sure. And I have guideline for me for the week. So, I make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I make progress. So, sometimes, I may be doing just some bit of research or anything. And for
Mm-hmm.
those things, I don't count on my team, I don't count on my peers. I make
Okay.
sure that I'm in charge at all times. So I find the
Mm-hmm.
support, I go out and get the support. Then rest
Right.
of the day is divided for my team. So they have my undivided attention for about 2 hours every day. I have a small
Mm-hmm.
team. I make sure they get my full attention irrespective.
Mm-hmm.
There is a
Okay.
part dedicated to my boss where he gets my full
Mm.
attention. Very important, cannot be
Sure.
ignored.
Okay.
And then I map out my stakeholders, and that is
Mm.
not a daily thing for me. So
Okay.
stakeholders are mapped out in the way I interact with them during
Mm.
the
As and when it comes.
yeah, and during the month I make sure that some
Mm.
all my key stakeholders
Mm-hmm.
in the month or in the quarter I'm meeting depending on the stakeholder.
Right.
So I map it out. Then whatever time is left,
Mm.
that all your operational firefighting that happens in every
Mm-hmm.
country,
Of
just
course.
every company in
Mm.
this country,
Sure.
and every line.
Can that too.
Yeah, kind of fills up that space,
Mm.
because then I make sure once I've gotten my important bits done, then I'm not worried about how much time is going in my
Mm.
calls, etc. So important,
Right.
especially to get that right early in the morning, because
Mm-hmm.
towards the end of the day you start losing control of your time,
Mm-hmm.
because your family starts demanding time, there are last minute calls, there's some meeting that.
Right.
So just for me
Right.
that
Right.
is more important than anything else.
So typically, and is there a clean break that you have at the end of the day? Because in remote working, we have seen that work and personal life really seep into each other. Is there a way to take a clean break? Do you manage to do it? Do you propose that, or what has been your experience?
So see, honestly, it has gotten tougher,
Mm-hmm.
because remote working does blur the lines, and also because your mind is so active that
Hmm.
even when you take a break, you can't really take a break. You're just thinking about it,
Right.
and it's mother's mind as well. So like you
Hmm.
never take a break. So it's like that. So I would like to say I'm doing it well, but honestly, I'm
Hmm.
work in progress, and I can't claim that at all. I'm trying to
Right.
learn to set boundaries. What I do
Hmm.
is on the weekend, I make sure
Mm-hmm.
that one day I switch off completely, because
Okay.
that is very very important to me. And
Hmm.
usually I do it on a Sunday, and
Mm-hmm.
I spend time on things I enjoy outside of work or with
Mm-hmm.
family, and that's clearly important to me.
Okay.
But other than that, have I struck a balance? Not really. But then the fact also is that,
Mm-hmm.
I do enjoy what I do. So
Hmm.
sometimes that may not always be the demand of the organization or
Right.
stakeholders, it just comes internally.
Right. So you're saying you sometimes do it of your own accord and you want to do it.
Yeah, it's a mix of both. Sometimes there are
Understood.
circumstances which are accentuating and you
Sure.
require it. And sometimes it's just there's a nice, interesting problem to solve,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to do it in my own
Right.
time.
Right. So, of course, pre-COVID, I'm assuming you would mostly have gone to work. But I remember in, I think, Aditya Birla Group, you did work from home for a while, even pre-COVID. But having experience both work in office and work from work from home, what are some of the differences do you see? Do you like one or the other? If you have to choose between them, would you want to choose?
Okay. I think it's an important question for everyone to ask themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can talk about myself is that in the past I would have preferred working from office, and I
Mm-hmm.
do hope that that's the case in near future as well.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, why I choose to work remotely is because I have a young girl,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of that need to have it all. So the whole
Right.
idea of not being there with her,
Right. Right. Of
is
course.
more
All the
stressful.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
So it takes a little more effort in an hybrid
Hmm.
organization, especially as
Hmm.
a team leader and as somebody who has strong
Hmm.
stakeholder connect,
Mm-hmm.
etc., external as well internal. It takes a lot more effort to be connected.
Right. Right.
But given the fact that I've been around in the industry, I have a
Hmm.
head learning curve, I have been mentored by great leaders in person.
Hmm. Right.
That's the place where I can be for a while when my life
Hmm.
requires it.
So
If you
at the
ask,
beginning of someone's career, then what is your experience?
I don't
Will those mentoring be feasible in a online world?
see. I have a more classist view in that. That I
Mm-hmm.
do feel that traditional way of mentoring works well, because
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of things, especially when you're dealing with people.
Mm-hmm.
You would have heard that 10% of communication is actually verbal, rest of it is non-verbal.
Right.
So one gets trained in
Hmm.
understanding that while learning.
Sure. But
Uh,
why not a Zoom call? Just playing the devil's advocate. Why not having a Zoom call? There also you can see each other and see someone's body language. What is the harm
because
in
you're
that?
not constantly in that
Hmm.
boiler room like that in the heat of the moment. You have
Understood.
defined times. I know I do it. I control
Ah.
myself a lot better on Zoom calls, and I have been doing a lot of those for past
Okay.
few years.
So you're saying
So
it's in those natural states where more and more learning happens is on in those small talk. That is
yeah,
where the learning happens. Okay.
yeah, and it's also like pandemic mandated it. So obviously our facilities and our infrastructure are
Hmm.
much
You had to
better.
do it, of course.
Yeah, but I
Hmm.
think, and
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of collaborations happening, and there are a lot of different models, but not all
Mm-hmm.
roles lend them nicely to remote working. And
Okay.
also, there are these challenges of boundaries in remote working.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of blurring in hybrid environment,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not always tuned in with the
Hmm.
office at all times. Like, for example,
Hmm.
you have these nice Diwali celebrations or anniversary celebrations or town hall.
Hmm.
Being in
Hmm.
person, there is a different kind of emotional state as compared
Right.
to being remote. Having said that,
Hmm.
I have made it work for me and my organization well, and I
Mm-hmm.
know quite a few people who have done it really well. I do
Mm-hmm.
know quite a few organizations who have chosen to be completely remote, and they have done it well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What is a little difficult is with hybrid, where there are
Hmm.
few people who are completely remote and there are
Hmm.
people who are always in office.
Okay.
There, I think as HR and as organizational leaders, we've not found the right balance.
Hmm. Okay. And if someone is, say, working from home currently because of the pandemic and is now exploring going back to office, are there, from a people management standpoint, communication, engagement, etc., is there anything specific, or are there any set of steps, as
Uh,
the HR team or as the founders or as the entrepreneurs should they be looking at taking if they are making the switch to
Definitely.
office?
Definitely, especially in young organizations and that have grown during pandemic. What
Mm-hmm.
happens is, it's simpler to lay infrastructure which is online. You're not
Right.
responsible for
Right.
health and well-being, for on-road
Right.
safety, etc. You're not
Hmm.
responsible for certain kind of work environment, so
Mm-hmm.
people are managing that on their own. So getting that right
Mm-hmm.
side of environment, ensuring people are collaborating, and also I think there
Mm-hmm.
is an overall resistance for people to come back to office,
Mm-hmm.
especially in cities like Mumbai, etc., where people joined work while they were remote. and now
Hmm.
suddenly this whole hassle of commuting, and they've gotten used to
Hmm.
certain way. So
Right.
yeah, so that, and off in office productivity has a different challenge as compared to remote productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So ensuring that those things are not getting in the way becomes very, very critical.
Hmm.
But I think
Okay.
more importantly, just what has been major challenge for HR overall and leaders
Mm-hmm.
overall is that there is a whole generation of people that have started work professional life
Only from
remotely
home.
itself.
Hmm.
Now
So they
for
don't
those
know what it
people,
means to be in office, and what
yes,
they don't know what they don't know basically.
yeah, and especially for a young organization, that becomes the
Hmm.
biggest challenge. And the second thing
But
is,
what
like,
is the challenge? Just to elaborate on the point. So if there are some people in an organization who have never worked in an office and they feel they are doing fine, they are delivering the work, they're giving the code, they're committing, they are productive. What are they missing?
so they're missing, they're growing. So what has happened with remote working a lot is we've created strong individual contributors,
Hmm.
but we've somewhere not started creating right managers and team players and team environment and collaborations. And that's a big part. This whole perspective of having a viewpoint beyond your next deliverable, especially at that young age, is very, very critical. So that has to come in. Second is in terms of participation at the organization, knowing organization beyond your manager, beyond, especially for like people who are starting early. I think that's a difficult one. I mean,
Just stepping on, I mean, just elaborating on that. Why should they know anyone beyond their manager? Apart from say friends, and you have friends, you become friends with your colleague, that's one. But what is the benefit in knowing someone beyond your manager? And why only this reporting line? Is that the only benefit, or is there any other benefit? What if, like, what are they missing out on not knowing someone from another department who possibly they'll never work with?
so there is a whole wide vista of things you're closing yourself out to, instead of expanding your horizons, experimenting, exploring, just understanding. So, for example, so for example, I'm in HR and I do not know what people in finance are doing, but that could be something I could get into at a later stage. So I'm closing all those doors to me. The careers, your careers don't run in a straight line, they work and have their own trajectories. So that whole fun is in exploring that journey. So you miss out on that because you're not interacting. And there's somewhere I read this, and it's very interesting. I don't know if you subscribe to it, but the only way to accelerate your career from in a different way is through networks. So how do you build networks? You don't build networks on LinkedIn or Facebook. You build networks by building trust with people, and that happens when you actually interact with them, understand their perspectives. And so far, maybe in future we'll have a different way of doing it because this all is new to us as remote workers. But so far, I don't think we've reached there where we can replace this interaction. Like take example of schools. I mean, uh, kids, we tell them all the time that it's good that you're getting good grades, but you need to learn how to socialize, how to engage with people, how to go out and get fresh air outside your homes. I mean, we're telling this to our kids, so we can't really forget that as grown-ups either.
Right. So, I mean, in a way, the people who are joining the organization for the first time are kids themselves, and in the professional life, they're babies, right? They're
Yeah,
a empty slate, and depending on their experience, and many of us have changed jobs completely. Like I used to
yeah,
be a engineer, to MBA, to finance, to entrepreneur. Pretty much played different roles, and so have you, as you mentioned, you are also from an engineering background, and that doesn't happen through without that exposure. And I would go on to say that even if you are focusing on your own field, no field is an island onto itself, right? Even if
correct,
you're a developer, you need to, if you're a software engineer, you need to understand what your clients are doing. You need to understand how your sales team is selling that. you need to understand how the operations team is handling, the bugs, the issues that come with any product. And that holds true
Yeah.
for any job. I think that holistic knowledge and that osmosis that happens, that's what makes for a profession, a great professional. And over time, it is those nuances, those sensitivity to other people's mindset and thinking. I think that has to
Yeah.
be thought through when anyone is looking at their own careers.
Yeah, I mean, for short
Right.
periods, possibly it's nice to be remote, given the priorities in life
Right,
or
for a short
situations
period,
that
right.
are in our control. But longer term, I'm not sure yet. If that changes in
Right.
future, we'll see. But
Sure.
possibly right now we're not there yet.
Right. Right. Right, right. So, Charu, you have just moving on. You have worked with really, really large organizations, global MNCs. You've worked with and then you have, your current job. You're working with a startup. Obviously, albeit one of the biggest startups in India, unicorn nonetheless. But what do you think is the core difference, or what are some of the core differences you found in working in a very large organization vis-a-vis a startup or a very fast-growing organization?
I think it's the mindset shift. When um, I was in a large organization, there is a difference that a lot of things are already established, and I'm more in a
Mm-hmm.
maintenance mode. So it could be something
Mm-hmm.
of a continuous improvement. Uh, Organization has the ability to move on its own a lot more, and there is just some
Hmm.
nascent things you do here and there, but not much.
So you're saying individual marginal contribution of every individual is a little bit limited in a large
Yeah,
organization.
I mean, one can make a difference, and you'll have some key projects, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that and obviously there is a lot more established processes that need to be followed, and there are a
Mm-hmm.
lot more questions in the system around it.
Hmm. Okay.
Also, resources are, at least basic resources, are never a constraint. As
Hmm.
compared to that, I think prudent startups and
Mm-hmm.
prudent entrepreneurs, they want, I mean, they try to achieve a lot more with a lot less, to put it
Mm-hmm.
in perspective. And
Sure.
especially for enabling functions like HR, they
Mm-hmm.
come into HR, into startup life a little later in the journey. Rightly so. You
Hmm.
have your first, you'll get your business functions going,
Mm-hmm.
and then so there is always a catch up that HR is playing in that sense.
Okay.
And I think primary difference is one, envisioning what others in HR have not envisioned so far.
Hmm.
And you have to
Mm-hmm.
think quite a few steps ahead, and that's where your established organization training comes in. And I think it's a great training to have, to know what
Mm-hmm.
are the right things to do,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the key roles of HR becomes governance, and then
Hmm.
governance is very, very critical. So that is one
Okay.
part. The second part is educating the system. So there was
Hmm.
this small startup, there was a lot of camaraderie, everything was done informally, and now suddenly there is
Mm-hmm.
a person who's coming in and saying,
Right.
look, you can't do that. It's not just your manager. I'll take this call whether you get this increase or that
Hmm.
increase. So that's a mindset shift also for the organization in that sense.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you're constantly selling and setting up things and setting up,
Hmm.
finding out. What works well is to build everything the way startup world works, from customer first
Hmm.
perspective. Start building, be agile, be modular, which is not always the case when you're doing it in established organization.
So HR person working in a startup also has to have that builder mindset. They have to
Yes. And
enjoy building
entrepreneurial
things from
mindset.
scratch. Hmm.
Yeah. Because
Entrepreneurial
you have to
mindset. Hmm.
prototype, see your users are accepting or not, or they're not, how
Hmm.
much change it is for them, is it digestible, then go back.
Hmm.
There's a lot of effort
Understood.
that goes into that. The other bit, which is very,
Right.
very different, is that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you may have a great idea in an established organization, but it may
Mm-hmm.
not always be organization priority. I mean,
Hmm.
because things are working, but a
Why
post
change something that isn't broken?
I mean,
And a
why?
startup is always broken. I
Yeah.
mean, everything is broken in a startup. You have to always keep doing new things. So yeah,
Yeah, so
or
it's
keep
like
fixing
this,
things.
extremes. Exactly. It's like extremes, two extremes. Don't touch it. Oh, please touch as many things as you can. And so you think here that okay,
Right.
let's try and focus,
Mm.
let's
You
try and
can't
get.
afford to be touchy-feely in a startup.
Yeah. So it's that way. And also in
Hmm.
startup, one of the key things that happens, I think that's the most critical role of it, of a HR leader in
Hmm.
startup, is in terms of the kind of culture you want to build. A lot of startups that are successful is
Okay.
because initially founders have spent a lot of time building the right team, and that team takes them to a
Hmm.
certain scale, and then it gets a little bigger, and then
Right.
HR becomes that keeper that drives that
Hmm.
further. So now
Hmm.
that's not a challenge in
So in
established.
a way, it's HR will be like has to be completely lockstep with the founders because they
Yeah.
have to envision or bring to reality the vision of the original founders and the senior leaders in the
Yeah.
company.
How do you keep
Hmm.
that culture or DNA intact as you continue to
Hmm.
grow and spread, which is
Hmm.
never a real challenge in established organization. If some part
Hmm.
doesn't work, somehow
Hmm.
culture brings it back. But
Hmm.
and culture takes a lot of effort and years
Hmm.
to build and evolve. So you
Of
can't
course.
play with it. And when it's
Okay,
broken,
when should a startup founder start thinking seriously about culture? When like 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 100 people?
the
When is the
first
right time to start thinking about it?
the first time he or she thinks about having a company, honestly. Now the whole
So from day
mission,
one, you're saying they have to think about culture.
from day minus whatever 10,
Hmm.
because you have to have right partners for this. And so
Hmm.
unless you think about that, you'll not get your right partners inside and outside.
Okay.
Those will be the key drivers. Those will be the ones
Hmm.
who present your image to your customers, to your future employees. And then that
Hmm.
core team that forms will continue percolating that culture. See, one
Hmm.
person doesn't build culture, right? It has to
Of
be
course. Top down.
cascaded
Hmm.
down. Yeah.
Right. Understood.
So you won't find right partners,
Hmm.
and suddenly you'll find yourself in a situation that this is not what I wanted to do with.
Hmm.
So you have to keep that thinking on and keep
Hmm.
checking it as you go. And it's very intangible, so it's not
Hmm.
the thing that you always understand and know how to handle.
Right. So how should someone enforce culture? Because at a startup, obviously there's so many constraints. The business, I mean, the whole existence is at risk. So what are some of the practical ways in which they can start instilling culture? Is it with hiring? Is it with performance management? Is it with something else?
So I think it starts from the time that you start hiring, but however,
Okay.
all your HR processes typically need to enforce it. And there has to be a lot
Hmm.
of role modeling along the way. I think hiring should
Hmm.
always have some non-negotiable. Um, More
Okay.
established organization call it values. New age
Hmm.
startups don't like to, but I think there should be some fundamental ethos in that form,
Hmm.
either through values
Understood.
or through some other measures,
Hmm.
which should be tested. I think founders should be closely
Okay.
involved in hiring at early stages and not leave it to the next team. It's very, very important. As you scale, then there should be specific senior
Okay.
leadership involvement. It's the most
Hmm.
critical thing as you're growing, because when you are growing and
But
when you're
how do you test for culture when you're interviewing? How do you test for or how do you interview for culture?
um, I think it's important to understand what are some of the behaviors we want to drive, right? And
Understood.
then
But
when
you're
you are hiring,
saying not just culture. I mean, ideally, people should have values listed down and then the behaviors for
yeah, so
each of those
behaviors
values,
associated with that,
hmm.
and
And try
then
to see
due.
examples around
Yeah,
it on
then
the
see
interview.
demonstrated evidence. So
Hmm.
those so go beyond just your
Hmm.
education, years of
Hmm.
experience, but
Right.
demonstrable, tangible experience, I think, and then
Hmm.
reinforce it through various mechanisms, including
Hmm.
performance, incentives, equity plans, etc.
Okay.
What is that you will recognize
Hmm.
people? And also have a very strong system to penalize people
Hmm.
when they are not the right fit, and take those
Okay.
decisions early on. Not
Okay.
always possible, but do
Hmm.
take those decisions early on, because that's right for the individual and right for the organization.
Understood. Understood. I mean, you are one of India's leading experts on compensation and benchmarking. So, as a startup, you mentioned ideally from a culture standpoint, even from recruitment, they ideally need to have a culture fit. But obviously, given startup founders are always, working with less, and have, of course, budget constraints in today's world, especially. How should they look at, say, compensation or a mix, or how to how should they look at giving an attractive offer, given all the constraints that they have? Any advice from a compensation benchmarking standpoint?
First of all, that's just my own personal view on things. So it's
Of
not
course.
backed by any other things. It's just my experiential thing. So I'm not speaking. I'm speaking personally on this one. The fact is that
Okay.
I think keeping costs low and productivity high is
Hmm.
clearly an aim that startups have. And therefore, hiring more for potential than performance, I think, is the bet they
Hmm.
need to make. Take early bets on people and empower them, um,
Hmm.
because that early growth, and then the incentive comes from the fact that when you actually hit the growth, then
Hmm.
that's when their wealth creation will happen.
Hmm.
Till then, they
Hmm.
gain valuable experience which they would not get otherwise outside. So
Hmm.
that's one, and that's the kind of people you are looking at, and that's kind of
So how,
structure.
how should a startup look to, say, compete with a Google or an Amazon? May not be of that ilk, but even if it's not a FANG company, but a established company which is willing to pay more, but it's a developer you like, there's a culture fit, or a whichever role, salesperson. How should, say, an entrepreneur try to improve their own offer? Is it only money? Is there any other dimension they can
Frankly,
highlight?
it's a huge difference actually between
Hmm.
what a startup and somebody like Google can do, because
Hmm.
while they may have deep pockets, they have more constraints, whereas startups usually have flexibility on their side and they can take
Hmm.
one-off decisions. So a startup could possibly think about personalized experiences.
Hmm.
So that we are in the age of Netflix and
Hmm.
Amazon, and when we are consuming these offers online, most of the startups are doing that for their
Hmm.
customers, and possibly it's time for us as HR to look at those customizations. So needs are different. Sometimes it's cash, sometimes short term, sometimes it's long term. um,
Hmm.
Therefore, it always helps to start customizing at that level.
Hmm. So any
So
practical
that
examples, if, say, we are offering, say, 15 lakhs, someone large company is offering 20 lakhs. So is there some breakdown? Okay, 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs we should we offer? Should we have some special bonus? Is there some
Yeah,
latest innovation in
so
that
what
other
you
startups are
said,
using? Fine.
possibly like early stage, you have valuations on your side, so you can offer a lot
Okay.
more equity as compared to
Hmm.
say a more established organization. So that's
Okay.
one area you can look at.
Hmm.
There's a lot more flexibility that you can offer in the way compensation is designed, with high risk uh, high risk high gain model, and give higher variable pay.
Okay.
um, so that's where I would say that it makes a lot of
So
difference.
possibly benchmarking to performance can be a, I mean, win-win, because if the person candidate, because there's always some uncertainty even at a hiring stage, even after all these interviews,
Yeah,
there may
yeah,
be a way to tie down the performance, or tie down the compensation to the performance, and that can be a win-win
yeah,
for all. I mean, if a candidate is smart enough, they'll also feel confident that they can achieve what they have.
yeah. And also I think you know one of the things that startups suffer with is people. They have a huge flux of people coming in,
Hmm.
going in at all points, and therefore it
Hmm.
uh, tying it with also some tenure helps, like
Hmm.
kind of
Okay.
deferring certain rewards